Mona, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm looking forward to this. Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Mona Terry. I am the Chief Victims Officer at the Identity Theft Resource Center. So my job is really to provide high-level oversight over our contact center. So it's really looking at the types of identity crimes that are being reported to the ITRC, analyzing kind of what the trends are, what are some things that we're seeing with preventative and protection methods, and then creating training material internally, and then creating content externally as well, so people know how to protect their identities and how to recover.
That's awesome. How did you get into how did you get into this field?
So I actually started at the Better Business Bureau. So doing consumer protection kind of in general, right out of college, and I got bitten by the consumer protection bug, is what I like to say. And then I had an opportunity to work with the ITRC, and so I've been here for almost 9 years. And I think that, for me, it's knowing that people are vulnerable and then being preyed upon for that vulnerability. It's just something that really makes me angry. It makes me upset, and so anything that we can do to help support, that's really what drives and motivates me. And then analyzing kind of the trends and getting ahead of those so that people are better protected. That's just really important to me.
Cool. How big is the ITRC now as far as staffing?
So we're pretty small. We're at 15, a grand total of 15 people, helping close from between 10 and 13,000 people, new victims of identity theft every year.
13,000. Oh, so you're almost 1,000 cases per employee,
Yeah.
per person. Are they employees or volunteers or a mix of both?
Employees.
1,000. So it's like, let's see, that's like half a dozen cases a day or so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely more.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
that's that's a that's an overwhelming an overwhelming tidal wave to work through. And are you guys self-funded in terms of a charity, or do you have like state and local support?
We are a 501(c)(3). We do have federal grants that we receive from Department of Justice, Office of Victims of Crime. And then we also have sponsors and partners.
Cool. So let's talk about kind of what's going on with identity theft. So can you define identity theft for the audience?
So we actually have started to talk about identity theft as identity crimes. So we kind of break it down into three sections. So there's identity theft, which is the actual stealing of someone's identity. And then there's identity compromise, where someone's identity has been stolen by someone else. Maybe someone accidentally gave out their information thinking they were talking to someone who was trusted. So nothing has happened yet, but they know that their information is out there and can be misused. And then there's identity misuse, which is where a thief has actually taken that information and is opening new accounts or taking over existing accounts, and really out there actively pretending to be someone else.
Gotcha. And so let's kind of work through the process. So like with the compromise, where are the situations where people are seeing the compromise happening?
The number one reported type of compromise is through scams, unfortunately. So usually it's someone who thinks they're talking to someone legitimate, whether it's a government agency, a friend, a business they do business with, and they're giving out personal information, thinking that something has happened and they need to give that information out. And then that's when they'll call us and say, hey, I gave out all this personal information, and now I'm worried that something might happen with that information.
Gotcha. Is there a particular scam that is kind of, I hate to say the phrase trendy, but more prevalent currently? Or is it still kind
Yeah,
of
so
the general mix?
it is the general mix, right? So we start to see the kind of things like romance scams and things like that. The number one thing that we've seen a real big uptick in is what we're calling impersonation scams. So it's where the scammers are pretending to be businesses. Funny enough, so usually it's government agencies we've seen a lot in the past.
Hmm.
Scammers trying to be Social Security Administration or IRS. And now we're seeing a lot of scammers pretend to be a business that someone does business with, or a financial institution that someone may interact with as well. And they're either sending fake invoices, they're pretending to be from the fraud department and saying, hey, something fraudulent's happened, but it's really a scammer. And the biggest thing we're seeing, which is a trend that we're watching, is that people are Googling customer service phone numbers and coming up with a scammer's phone number. And so they think they're actually talking to the business when really they're talking to a scammer.
That's challenging because I think, historically we've generally told people of, never, if someone else initiates the phone call, I'll always have a certain amount of distrust when you didn't initiate it. But if you need to, verify, visit their website and get their phone number, how are the fake phone numbers getting into that process?
A lot of times it's through advertisements. A lot of times the scammers now can purchase advertising on search engines, right? And so those
Hmm.
are popping up at the top of the search. So I think that really knowing how to scroll through a search engine kind of search is important. Um, I'd say that's probably the number one way is that we're seeing a lot of ads. And I think even with things like typical advice that we used to give, right, with emails and with websites is a lot of misspelling,
Yeah.
poor English, things like that were typical things. Well, now with AI, they're getting a lot better about looking legitimate, using proper grammar, proper English. So it's getting a little bit harder, but that's usually what we're seeing.
So I guess the advice is make sure you've got the right website, or that you're looking at a physical mail statement that is a legitimate statement from that entity that you're dealing
Yeah,
with.
or exactly. Or if you have a card on the back of the card, there's contact information usually too.
Yeah, I have yet to hear of fake credit cards being mailed out with a fraudulent with fake phone numbers on the back.
Yeah, knock on wood.
Yeah, the tomorrow we're both going to get a credit card with a fake phone number on the back.
Right.
So aside from so the really the issue here is making sure that you're not giving out your personal information unless unless you're very confident that you're working with the right entity, and that if you're calling someone, you're making sure that you're getting a hold of the right company that you're trying to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's hard, right? I think these scammers have gotten so good about getting into people's heads. And so they create this sense of urgency, whether it's through email, whether it's on a chat, whether it's through text message, call. And so I think people are so like, they want to do the right thing, right? Victims
Yeah.
they want to do the right thing. I want to do the right thing. I don't want to be scammed, or I don't want someone to be taking advantage of me. And so I think that, not being afraid to say, you know what, I'm going to call you back, and then verifying who it is that you're talking to and making sure that you have the right number. That goes a long way.
Yeah, and not trusting the caller ID. I know a
Yes.
friend of mine got a phone call from someone claiming to be his bank, and he looked at the caller ID and it matched, and they had claimed to be calling from the fraud department, and started to going down this process. He thought it was a little odd, but something previously had happened, so it wasn't entirely unexpected that he might get a call from the fraud department. And at some point, they said, "Hey, we're gonna send you a PIN code, and we need you to just to confirm that you are who we are talking about." And so he gets the PIN code along with a message that says, "Under no circumstances give this to anyone on the phone." He's like, "Oh my goodness!" And like, this isn't the real company. This isn't really my bank.
Yeah, I had a friend who actually was contacted by her local sheriff's department. And so it was the name of an actual sheriff. It was the right phone number, everything, saying that there was a warrant out for her arrest and all of these, right? So she was really concerned. And then her husband, and so don't tell anyone, right? If you tell someone,
Yeah,
you're going to jeopardize this case. Well, she told her husband, who
yeah.
was right behind her, and he called the sheriff's department, who said, "You're the fifth call we've gotten in the past 15 minutes about
Oh,
this scam." So luckily they were, had that wherewithal. And they had two different phones, right? So someone
yes.
was there with her to be able to make that call.
Yeah, I think this comes back to the when someone's telling you not to talk to someone else about this, that should be something that is really concerning, because why are they trying to isolate you?
Right. Well, and I think victims feel a lot of shame themselves, right? So they're already kind of predisposed to not want to tell anyone that something's happening
Yes.
to them. So when the scammers reinforce that, it's usually a big red flag.
Yeah, that's awful. So what do you classify as misuse, and how does someone identify that, and what are the scams involved in misuse?
So misuse for us is usually either account takeover. So that's, you have maybe a credit card account and someone's making charges that are not yours and not something that's authorized. We've seen with IRS accounts too, someone filing taxes in your
Yeah.
name. Really anytime, any kind of anywhere where you would have an account. So even if it's like a retailer, anywhere where you have an account. So there's account takeover with someone, you have a legitimate account established in your
Hmm.
name that someone is misusing. Someone's getting in there making charges, not you. And then there's new accounts being established in your name. So we've seen an uptick in bank accounts actually being established in people's names.
Mm,
Credit card accounts. So usually, typically, it's checking and credit card accounts that we see with new accounts being established. But we've seen, insurance accounts. We've seen
yeah,
mortgage
interesting.
accounts. Yeah, we've seen a number of accounts being established in someone else's name. We've seen a lot of medical. We've seen medical accounts being
Interesting.
established. Yeah, so those are primarily, and then misuse is also someone committing a crime using your information, and then someone obtaining employment using your information. That's usually what we consider misuse.
So it's probably the most common misuse because periodically I start seeing fraudulent charges showing up on my credit card. And it's like, okay, someone got my credit card number or guessed the card number or breached some database somewhere. I know they don't physically have my card and they don't have access to any of my accounts. They're just using a credit card. Is that kind of the most common misuse, or is it
Yeah, most
account
common
takeovers?
misuse. Yeah, it's definitely account takeovers. We're seeing a lot of social media account takeover as well. That's another big kind of trend that we've seen. And I think that is challenging for people because they have a lot of their personal information, like pictures and things like
Yeah.
that, they don't have access to. And then for a lot of people, they use their social media as a source of income,
Yeah.
right? Because they're selling things and they have their own business. And so we've seen a lot of social media account takeover.
Yeah, and so what's the best, since we're talking about that as prevalent, what's the best way to protect your social media accounts or any accounts for that matter?
The best way is to have unique passwords. If you have a chance to do passkeys, using unique phrases. One of the examples I like to give is, for example, if my dog goes shopping on a pet store site, I might say Fido's favorite store, throw in
Hmm.
a couple of extra characters in there, right? To so something I can remember. But definitely unique passphrases is the best way to do that. And then multi-factor authentication. So if you have a chance, right, to get a code texted to you, more secure having an
Yeah.
authenticator app that changes those every once in a while. Those are probably the easiest ways to protect your accounts.
Yes, but please, if any, this is for the audience, if anyone says SMS is not a good two-factor authentication, yes, that's true, but it's a whole heck of a lot better than no two-factor. I would rather have someone
Absolutely.
use a low-quality two-factor authentication versus no second factor than the authentication.
Agreed.
'Cause extra security is better than no extra security.
Exactly.
And so what then is identity theft?
Identity theft is really when someone steals your identity. So just like as it sounds. So that's anyone, they can get it from, right? Data breach information that's been leaked anywhere. Physical theft is still alive and well. People are going into mail boxes and stealing mail.
Hmm.
They're stealing wallets and purses, breaking into cars and getting paperwork that's been left in cars. So really any information that's been stolen is
Hmm.
identity theft.
And that's more where they are kind of assuming your identity open so that they have enough information to open new accounts, to pretend to be you, that sort of thing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, they're stealing that information with the intent to misuse it and to pretend to be you.
And so, what would this like? I guess we didn't talk about the signs of misuse. Let's take a step back. The signs of misuse would be you're seeing charges on your credit cards that you weren't expecting, or seeing new accounts created. What would be the signs that someone might be seeing of identity theft?
That one's a little harder, I think. I think it's knowing that your information's been stolen is a lot harder to track.
Hmm.
So I think that it's really you have to be vigilant for those the actual misuse or account takeover. Someone getting a letter saying someone opened an account in your name, right? If you know that you've been a victim of physical theft, someone's broken into the mailboxes, someone's stolen your wallet. Um, but other than that, knowing if someone has stolen your information, other than it kind of showing up like in dark web monitoring,
Hmm.
maybe, or being notified by someone, it's really hard to track.
Gotcha. And are there ways that you can kind of mitigate the impact of people getting enough information to create accounts on your behalf?
Yeah, I think especially because we see financial accounts as the number one type of account that's being taken over. We always encourage people to freeze their credit,
Hmm.
right, so that no one can open up new accounts in your name with your social security number. Um, that is probably the number one advice, other than using multi-factor authentication on all your accounts. Kind of the things we've already talked about. Those are the biggest ways to protect. your information.
So I know when freezing your credit first came out, it was a pretty cumbersome process, and you actually had to pay the credit bureaus money to freeze your credit. Is that still the case now?
It is not. You actually can do it for free. You can actually check your credit report often as well. You don't have to pay for that either. Right now, I believe you can check it weekly.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, and if the process to freeze your credit has definitely become a lot easier. You can do it online. You can call if you need to call, and then if you needed to, if you don't have access to either of those options or they just don't work for you, then you can still submit paperwork and send it in the mail. But that's probably the least secure. We don't want people sending information via mail if we
Yeah.
can help it.
And nowadays you can also kind of, it used to be as many hoops as you had to jump to freeze your credit. You had to jump through all the same hideous uh, hoops to unfreeze your credit, and then you had to jump through all the hoops to refreeze it again and repay
Right.
it. So my understanding is a lot of them now will do like a timed, what they call a thaw, I guess, or something like that, where we'll unfreeze your credit for a day, a week, or a month, whatever you decide. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You can do it for a certain time frame, and you can even do it sometimes for certain creditors. So if you know you're applying for a loan with a specific company, you could say, "I just want to thaw my credit for this specific company to access for this amount of time."
That sounds like a much better way to go. So you're basically saying, I'm going to keep my credit all locked down except for this situation that I know about and for them and them only.
Yeah, that's definitely the most secure. And I don't. A lot of people don't know too. You can actually freeze your child's credit report as well, which is something that's really useful.
And like, do you? I guess it would be a lot more challenging to notice if your minor child's credit has been compromised or taken over. You probably won't even notice that until they try to get credit.
Usually that's the case, unless you start seeing something like you see credit cards appearing their name in the
Yeah.
mail, right? Applications, things like that. Or you go to, we've had a few people, mostly when their social security number, a child's social security number has been compromised, where they go to apply for benefits and they're
Hmm.
denied those benefits for their child. Because it shows that they're working, that they have, right? They're bringing income, things like that. So yeah, it's usually most people don't think to check that because a child shouldn't have a credit
Yeah.
report.
Can you? How young can you freeze a child's credit?
As soon as they have a social security number assigned to them. So
So would the advice be as soon as your kid has a social security number, freeze their credit?
I would say so. Yeah, to be the most secure, absolutely.
They're not going to need it for a few years. So,
Yes.
so once someone has become a victim of identity theft, whether it's a compromise, a misuse, or someone's impersonating, what steps should they take to start to deal with it?
I think it really depends. I mean, so I would say contact the Identity Theft
Yeah.
Resource Center. I think that's always an easy way to do that because really we're going to walk through what was compromised, what was
Hmm.
misused, what is being misused, kind of really, because I think it really depends on what information's out there, what accounts are being impacted, and what is that impact to the person specifically. I think that everybody, if it's someone's bank account, that's going to be maybe a lot more serious because it's readily access to cash than a
Yeah.
credit card account, right? Things like that. So I think that really, I would say contact the ITRC so we can walk you through that. But it's really just identifying where the identity theft is happening and what account is being impacted. We're seeing driver's licenses too. We've seen people who have gone to renew their driver's license and aren't able to because there's a driver's license opened in their name in another state. So obviously that's going to be very impactful. So
Yeah.
that's something they may want to address first if they're noticing multiple issues.
Gotcha. And does the ITRC, do you do that work for them, or do you walk them through that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we walk people through the steps to take. So we don't want to be a source for identity information for other people to get to. So we won't ask for that type of information. We don't ask for account numbers, anything like that, any personal information. So what we do is we kind of serve as someone to walk alongside the victim who's trying to recover their identity or protect their identity. So that if they get stuck in a process, if they're not understanding what they've been told, we can serve as kind of that resource to go to help as long as it takes. So whether it takes one day, 1 month, 1 year, longer, we've had a few people who have had multiple issues over multiple years. We will just continue to be that resource to walk alongside that person, knowing that we've been in this space for a while and kind of know what to do.
Hmm.
We'll walk alongside them to do that.
And how much work does it generally take someone to unravel an incident?
Unfortunately, it takes a lot. Usually there's paperwork to fill out, and if it's multiple instances, and then also, right, if it's your social security number, the potential for then other types of identity theft, even if you've only contacted us about one
Hmm.
specific type is there. So there's steps to just not only recover from the specific issue that's happening, but then thinking about what you need to do to protect other things, protect yourself from other things happening.
Yeah.
So it can take a while.
Can you put a time window on a while? Because I think part
Yeah,
of it is an
sure,
issue of like setting expectations for people in terms of,
sure.
oh yeah, this is something I can take care of in a couple hours and my life will be fine, or this is something that's gonna maybe I won't be spending an hours a day for several months, but all the steps might just with the back and forth might take a couple months to happen.
Yeah, I think with account takeover, I'd say, anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on how bad the account takeover is. It's usually easier if you've established the kind of account in your name and you already have that established and someone's coming into that account and
Hmm.
doing things that they're not supposed to do. It's a lot easier to recover from that, especially with financial institutions. If someone's opened a new account in your name and so they've pretended to be you this entire time, that usually will take, I mean, probably up to 6 months, if not longer, because now you have to jump through the hoops of proving that you're the actual person, not the thief that was able
Hmm.
to open the account in your name. And then getting that part resolved, depending on the backlog of the institution that you're contacting, that can take, anyway, 3 to 6 months, but we've had a lot of people say it's been a year or longer.
And if it is an issue where someone has been using a social security number to earn income and either short pay or not pay their taxes, how long does it take to unravel tax issues kind of on the state and the federal level?
Um, I think on the state level, we don't get a lot of information about people running into issues on the state level. I'd say that takes, anywhere up to a year. With the IRS, it can take 2 years or more. It just depends on where they're at and kind of what happened with with IRS filing.
Wow, that's that's tough. Like I think most people
Yeah.
expect if my identity was able to be compromised quickly, my resolution should be quick, but it sounds like we're not there yet.
No, not yet. And I think that's why it's so impactful. I think that's why identity cards are so impactful because not only do you have to live your daily life and go through all the regular things, but now you're trying to fight this identity theft issue. That takes a lot of time. It takes time away from your family, from friends, right? From your personal, from your work. And that's part of the reason why we're here also. It's just so that you have someone to support you through that and know that you're not alone.
Yeah, someone who knows, okay, this is a 65 step process.
Right. Let's start with step one.
We're going to start at step one today, and
Exactly.
as opposed to thinking, well, I could resolve all this in one phone call, and go on with my life.
Right.
Oh, that's challenging. Um, in talking with people, what do you kind of? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Or do you guys provide any kind of emotional support as well, or is it just kind of the practical? Here are the steps that you need to take. But if you feel, but if you're feeling ashamed, go talk to someone, talk to a professional.
I think that, we're not trained therapists, but we do listen, right? I think that
Mhm.
we're trauma informed and I think we care. And I know we do.
Yeah.
But we generally care about the people who come to us. And so I think that, it helps to have that just to be a sounding board and say, look, I'm scared, I'm worried, I don't know what's going to happen. You're going to have an empathetic ear when you talk to someone with ITRC because we run into this a lot. A lot of us have been victims ourselves at one point or another.
Hmm.
We understand the challenges that can be faced and that, the time that it takes and all of those things. And so really, I think that, while we are action oriented, we want to empower people to take action. We're also happy to just listen.
Hmm. It is one of the impediments of people kind of moving forward is the that first call of kind of I'm going to phrase it from what maybe people might be internally thinking, kind of like swallowing their pride and the embarrassment of it when they really shouldn't be embarrassed because very likely it could have nothing to do with anything that they did wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely a lot of shame around. I cannot believe this happened to me. I'm smarter than this. I know better than this. We've had a lot of people contact us kind of, 6 months, a year after an incident has happened. And it's gotten to the point where it's bad enough. They felt like they needed to reach out for help.
Hmm.
And that's what we hear, right? I cannot believe that I knew better. This is right. I can't believe this happened to me. I'm doing all the things, everything right. So there's definitely that's a big piece of it too. But I also think it's just overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Thinking I don't even know where to start. Or if I do know where to start, this feels like it's just a lot. And I already have a lot going on in my life to have to deal with this too. It's just a lot. And so that sometimes is an impediment as well. Which is why we're here to say, look, even if it's step one, like you said, of a 65-step process, we're here. Let's start with step one. We're in it together.
Gotcha. Do you guys provide not just, phone support, but do you provide support in sense of like, okay, if you've had this type of compromise or this type of theft, we'll send you a PDF or send you the processes so you can work it on through it yourself, or is it the sort of thing that you only do it over the phone, one step at a time, kind of hand holding, or do you like provide like a self service of like, here's all the steps, call us if you need help.
Yeah, it's really up to the person who's contacting us. So what we do is when they call us and we kind of figure out what's going on and what the main issues are, we come up with a recovery plan for that
Gotcha.
person. And we send a copy of that recovery plan. And so that person can either take those steps on their own, call us if they're having issues. If they're like, this is too much, okay, let's start with step one. We'll walk through it. So everyone gets a recovery plan and then kind of how they want to manage that plan going forward, whether they want to do it themselves or with our support, totally up to them.
Gotcha. So tailored to their circumstances as well
Absolutely.
as tailored to how they want to move forward.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Do you guys work much with law enforcement and referring people to law enforcement?
We do. We definitely, a lot of times, there a law enforcement report is needed to prove that someone's a victim of identity theft. But we also provide support to law enforcement saying, hey, if you're getting reports directly to you as law enforcement, and you're doing your investigations and kind of really, right, you don't have as many resources to provide to that victim, but they can refer those to us as well. And so we kind of work together, and while the law enforcement is doing kind of what they need to do on their end, issuing the reports, do the investigations, we can kind of walk the victims through the practical kind of day by day steps and different things that they need to do. We can provide the ongoing support where the police departments may not have as much resources.
Gotcha. Have you found as time has gone by getting support from the police departments in terms of yes, they'll even take a report? Has that gotten easier over the years?
It's a mixed. I think we've heard that for some people it is a lot easier, and I know some people can even just go online and file those reports. And we still hear people who run into a lot of challenges with getting a police report.
Yeah, I would expect like unfortunately, like some police department would say, well, someone stole your credit card. There's nothing we can do about it. We
Right.
just call your credit card company.
Right, right. And we do hear that. And so we do have victims to come to us and tell us that has been their experience. And a lot of times we use that as an education piece too, and kind of putting on our advocate hat a little bit and contacting that police department and saying, hey, we have a victim of identity theft. They need a police report to move forward. What can we do to help make this happen?
And is that something that helps when the victim is kind of empowered with go to your police department and ask for them to do this and tell them X, Y, or Z. Yeah, X, Y, or Z. It's hey, I've been told that I need a police report in order to do this next step in recovering my identity. I don't necessarily expect you to go out and try to find the person. I just need
Right.
a report.
Yeah, right. So we'll give them that kind of verbiage, even if they're talking to fraud departments, right? Here, contact the fraud department, say these things, right? Let them know this is where you're at in the process and what you need from them, and empowering the victim to do that. And then we do now are offering this service where if victims have either tried that and have not been successful, or they don't feel comfortable pushing that
Mhm.
hard, that we are happy to step in and go, hey, if you're running into a barrier, we can try and help you overcome that barrier.
That's great. So, if people want to find the Identity Theft Resource Center, how do they find you guys?
The best way is through our website, idtheftcenter.org. And people can chat with us there. Our phone number's there. They can submit an email. They can submit a form online. I mean, short of carrier pigeon, really, going to the website is the best place to start, and then they can reach us from there.
And do you guys provide any sorts of reports about what's going on, industry trends, or anything like that?
We do. We have our trends and identity report that comes out annually, and that talks about the trends that we're seeing in identity theft and what is being reported to the ITRC. We have our consumer impact report that talks about kind of the non-financial impacts that identity theft has on victims, and we have a data breach report. So we have about 3 or 4 annual reports that people can even sign up for a newsletter if they'd like.
I Half jokingly, I assume your data breach report is just absolutely massive, unfortunately.
It is. It is. It's all. It's a conglomeration of all the publicly reported data breaches, and the attack vectors and what types of information, how many victims have been reported. Yeah, so it's quite hefty.
Yeah, you and I were kind of joking before we started recording. I think between the two of us, we almost daily are getting breach notifications or uh, here, yeah, or there's a lawsuit against a company who had a
Yeah,
breach, or here's another year of free identity theft monitoring. I probably
yeah,
have 40 years worth now.
same. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a problem that isn't going away anytime soon, I don't think.
Do you find do you guys recommend identity theft, either insurance or monitoring?
We kind of look at it as analogy I like to use like washing your car, right? You can pay someone to do that for you, or you can do it yourself.
Yeah,
So yeah, so it's really up to kind of where a person's at and whether they'd rather have someone else monitor that information or they'd like to kind of learn how to do it themselves.
but either way, it should be done. Either you do it yourself or have someone do it for you.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely keep an eye on all your accounts and your credit. For sure.
Don't joke, and I guess that's the thing is don't assume that no news. Like if you're not getting if you're not getting notified that there's been a problem, that doesn't mean there hasn't been a problem.
Right. And don't be afraid to check too, right? If you're like, I think something, but I don't want to know. I don't want to know that something's
Yeah,
happened. Right. Because obviously there's a resource that's available and there's many resources available. So if you do find something, they can kind of start to follow right now.
awesome. And if people want to connect with you, how can they best connect with you?
LinkedIn is a great way to connect. Happy to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link to all those resources and your LinkedIn account in the show notes. Mona, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. This is a great conversation.